Okie doke. I'm going to just dive in and get started because I have, as promised in the blurb, a lot of demos here. And but I want to just start by introducing myself. I'm John Maloney. I'm one of the lead developers of MicroBlocks, along with Bernat, and Turgut from our team is also here. Um, uh, Basically, this story starts in March when Google added the ability to connect to serial devices from the Chrome and Edge web browsers. And shortly after that, two members of the Snap and Microblocks community, Turgut and Darius, started working on a library for the serial port for Snap. And they built this library using the JavaScript extension, and they went through many iterations and tried all kinds of things and refined it. And eventually they sent it to Jens, and he's going to incorporate it in the next version of Snap. So I'm actually running the dev version of Snap, which is kind of the early version of the next version, and so that I can just use that built-in library. So once that gets released, you won't need to enable JavaScript extensions to use the serial port. So what the serial port allows is the combination of the serial port plus MicroBlocks allows you to do physical computing from Snap. So this is really exciting. So let me show you in the corner of my screen, you should be seeing a little picture of a microbit. And I've got here a Snap project that when I click here, I can connect to that microbit. So when I click here, this is the Chrome dialog box. Why is it? There we go. It's a little slow because of Zoom. That allows me to choose the microbit and connect to it. And now that I've connected to it, I can send it messages. So here's this on message, which makes all these LEDs on the microbit turn on, and off, which of course makes them go off. So I'm actually turning on and off the LEDs on the microbit, but using a extension board called a relay board, you could actually control other things like lights or fans or other household appliances from the microbit. So that means from Snap, you could basically do home automation. Another thing you can do with the display is you can display text by scrolling it across the display. And it's actually surprising that a 5 by 5 LED display can be used to represent messages. Yet another thing you can do is you can make images. So I wrote this very simple program that uses dots and X's to represent on and off or off and on pixels, and I can use that to make different images appear on the display. But that's not all. So you can plug things into the microbit, and what I've done here is I've plugged in a strip of RGB LEDs, which are programmable from the microbit, and I can program them from Snap by sending this message. So this basically says set the RGB value for all 10 neopixels to 200,000. I can make a different color by changing the RGB value. So this will make a sort of a purple magenta-ish color. And I can even automate that. So I can make a fade from one color to another. So from blue to red using this for loop. And that's basically just repeatedly, it's actually consing together a message, neopixel, with a couple of different numbers, the red, green, and this actually, the green is always 0, but red and the blue numbers, which are changing based on the eye. So that's cool. So we can control lights. I can turn those off by clicking that. Another thing we can do is we can control motion using this thing. This is called a servo. So this actually is a little programmable device that can move that pointer from left to right. So let's see how that works. So so here it is on the right, here it is on the far left, and here it is in the middle. So it's very precise positioning within 180-degree range. And by attaching things to this, like for example, paper clips connected to pieces of cardboard, you can create things like animatronic animals, or even actual practical devices, like you could make a cat feeder that released a little bit of cat food every time that servo moved. So those are really cool things. Those are outputs that you can use. But the microbit can also be used for input. So let me plug in a different microbit. And yes, I'll plug in a different microbit. I'm going to close the serial port for this one and come to a different program here. So, so in this program, just make that, there we go. This program actually is going to graph data coming from a sensor on the microbit. So the microbit has a bunch of different sensors. It's got a light sensor, it's got a temperature sensor, and it's got an accelerometer which can be used as a tilt sensor. So let me go ahead and connect this. And as soon as I do, I've got this program running that's, whoops, I dropped it, so it made a little spike. It's got this program running which is graphing the left-right tilt value. So if I tilt to the left, then the sprite goes down. If I tilt to the right, it goes up. If I wiggle it from side to side, I can make a wiggly line. So that is really cool, and you can imagine using that to control a game, that tilt. And actually, if time allows, I will do that as a demo. But before I do that, I actually want to do something different. I want to do a science experiment. So some of you have probably heard about something called the Vomit Comet, which is a plane that flies in a parabolic arc and simulates weightlessness for something like 30 seconds at a time. And the astronauts use this to train for going up into space. So what I have here is I have a second microbit that has a little on-off switch, hard to see. But this one can transmit wirelessly to this other microbit. And when I press this A button, it's going to start doing that. And then at that point, this microbit will start sending the total acceleration, not just the left-right value, but the total acceleration. And then it'll start graphing that. So here we go. So now we're seeing that the total acceleration is just arbitrarily 100. That means 1 Earth gravity. And it doesn't matter what the orientation of this is. As long as it's not moving, it's going to be 1 Earth gravity. But what I want to do now is I'm going to sort of toss this up in the air and hopefully catch it. And I want to simulate that sort of free fall. So what should happen is as it's falling, it should actually drop to 0 Gs because it will be in free fall. So let's see what happens. Okay, when I caught it, the batteries jiggled around and it actually stopped sending. So that's why we don't have anything after this point. But what we see here is a lovely example of 1G, 1G, 1G. I just dropped it. I didn't throw it up in the air. So there's no acceleration. I just let it go, and suddenly the gravity or the acceleration it was sensing went to 0. So it was basically sensing 0 Gs. And then I caught it, and there's a huge spike before the battery stopped sending data. But that's basically the crash impact. So you can actually use this both for detecting 0 G, but also you could do it, you could sort of automate like the egg drop experiment where you try to make something that cushions the landing of something and you measure what the G-forces are. Okay, so I want to use this graphing tool for something else, which seems at first totally unrelated. This is an infrared remote control, which is a pretty common device for controlling televisions, stereo components, fans, air conditioners, all kinds of things. It works by sending pulses of invisible light across the room to control the device, which actually seems pretty cool. Invisible light controlling a device wirelessly. Science fiction 100 years ago, even 40 years ago, this infrared technology was very new and it cost like $150 for an infrared remote control. This one costs $5. So the price has really dropped. So I said that the light was invisible, and it is to our eyes. We can't see infrared light. But if I point this at my camera and get it maybe a little closer, you'll see some flickering purple light as I press these different buttons. And that purple light is the infrared. That's how the CCD camera is sensing infrared light. Now, this doesn't actually work with iPhones because they cleverly have an infrared filter, so they can't actually see the infrared because it kind of messes up and blurs pictures. So it makes for better visual light pictures, but we can't use it to sense infrared remotes. But what I want to do now is I'm going to use a different, yet another microbit. And yes, this one here. This microbit is connected to an infrared receiver module. So this is basically an infrared light detector plus some other electronics. It's got a little amplifier with automatic gain control. It's got some mechanism to try to filter out the flicker from incandescent and fluorescent lights or sunlight. But what I can do is I can sort of send messages to this. And I believe if I just press, oh, I have to start this. Here we go. Is that right? Oh, it's not sensing the IR. Wonder why that is. Okay, I see that this is picking up IR. Let me restart my graphing program here. Oh yeah, of course. Duh. I plugged in a different microbit, so it wasn't connected to that microbit. All right, let's try this again. All right, there we go. So now we're actually recording the pulses of infrared light, and you'll notice that there are some narrow pulses and some wide pulses. So the narrow pulses are zeros, the wide pulses are ones, and believe it or not, that's actually 40 pulses in that pulse train. So it's 40 bits, which is 5 bytes of information, and the first part of it is always the same, whatever button I press, because it's the sort of manufacturer ID for this controller and device. But the last ones, if you notice, if I press this button, there's a bunch of wide ones, and if I press this button, there's some mixture of wide and narrow ones. So the last set of pulses is actually encoding the number that's getting sent. And we can actually get that number and display it. So MicroBlocks has a decoder for that. And if we say I press the B button, so it's now going to send the decoded message. And it shows up in the little talk bubble for the sprite. So this first key is a 0, this key is 1, this key is 2, and so forth. It actually skips 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I can actually use this in a snap program, so I could switch to a costume based on the number that it's receiving. So let's see, costume 1, costume 2, very creative with these costumes. You can imagine using that control, this remote control, to control a snap program. Could be a game, it could be an animated story, it could be sort of a quiz where you're answering questions by pressing a different number key. So lots of possibilities here. And what I like about it is that you can totally figure out and understand how the actual remote control system works just using the graphing tool. Now I'm going to actually switch to yet another really cool thing that has to do with physics and also has to do with wireless. And for that, I'm going to use this device, which you don't see much of anymore. This is my emergency AM/FM radio that runs on batteries. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a signal to that with a microbit. So I have a microbit here. Plug this guy in, and I have to add an antenna to make sure that I can transmit to the radio. So I'm going to connect this antenna to that pin 0, and I'm just going to drape this wire over here. It's not actually touching the radio. Well, it was touching the base of the radio, but now it's not. So it's going to transmit wirelessly to the radio. Did I turn it? I turned the radio on. Yep. So let's connect our MicroBlocks, connect to our microbit. So if I click this block, let's turn the volume up on the radio. You're hearing a beep, and when I click this, it stops. Bernard or Turcotte, could you say yes if you can hear that?
Yes.
Great, excellent. So using this sort of ability to turn the radio on and off and send a beep, I made this Morse code program written in Snap. It's just a very simple method, and it translates dots as short beeps and dashes as long beats. long beeps, and any spaces in between as a little sort of extra time. So here we go. So that's Morse code for SOS. Three shorts is S, three longs is O, and it's an emergency distress signal. Also, using the same technique, we can change the modulation frequency. So the rate at which we turn the AM carrier on and off determines the audio frequency that we hear. And we can make different frequencies, and thus we can send music. So in honor of the Olympics, we've got this. I just think that's very cool. This is all being done by a computer program that's turning that pin and off super fast, 530 kilohertz, 530,000 times a second. And then there's a sort of a second loop that's turning that carrier on and off at whatever audio frequency we want. So basically, it's radio by computer all the way down, which is just incredibly cool. I also should note that one of the very first, I did a little bit of research into this, and I discovered that although Turing's group at Manchester is attributed, they made the first computer music recording in, I think, 1951, but I discovered that there might actually be an earlier case where somebody made computer music, and it was a woman named Betty Holborn, and she programmed a computer called the BINAC to play for He's a Jolly Good Fellow as a sort of a celebration that they had finished this computer. She did many other things. She was like a super programmer. I think she implemented or helped implement COBOL and another computer language. So it's sort of a little known fact that she may have been the very first computer music person ever, which I think is a just very cool thing. Okay, so I do have maybe just a tiny bit of time left, and with that time, what I'm going to do is I will go back to the game that I talked about, and quickly show you how the tilt sensor can be used to play a game. So let's see here. Put that there. I'm going to go back to my little tilt microbit here. I'm going to connect. Okay, so this is a game that Bernat wrote, and it's meant to be played by hitting the space bar to make this little circle go up and down, but I modified it so that tilting the microbit makes the circle go up and down. And I figured that'll help give me an advantage. It'll be easier than hitting the space bar. So I'm going to get the game started. Oops. Well, okay, wait a second. I got to start over. That was a... So as I move through this maze and go past obstacles, it will get faster. And right now it's very easy to hover at a certain altitude by tilting this. I better go down and go under that. And it gets faster. I don't know if you can hear the music, but the music is very cool too. It's getting even faster. Go under that guy. So far, so good. Whoops, better go over that guy. And yeah, so far, so good. I think I'm doing better than I would have done with the space bar. Just really cruising along here. The points are mounting up. Whoa, under that, over that. And the points are mounting up. Ooh. This might be my best shot ever. Usually I hit something by now. I think Zoom is giving me an advantage by slowing the whole game down. Oops, okay. Game over. But not a bad score. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over for questions. I think I have about 1 second left for questions. I told you I was going to pack the demos.